At the family dinner, my dad boasted about my brother's 4-bedroom mansion and smirked, "Maybe one day you'll have a place like that." I smiled and said, "Actually, Dad, I bought that entire street last year, his house included." The table went dead silent. My name is Tiffany Crawford, 32 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work in commercial real estate, but you wouldn't know it from the cozy townhouse I call home. Last Tuesday, at a family dinner in my parents' dining room, my dad couldn't stop raving about my older brother's new 5-bedroom mansion. "It's got a home theater, heated floors, the works," Dad said, his voice swelling with pride. My brother, Nathan, sat there with that familiar smirk while his wife, Veronica, chimed in about their imported marble and designer kitchen. I stayed quiet, pushing pasta around my plate, used to being background noise. Then Dad turned to me, his tone dripping with that mix of pity and condescension I'd grown up with. "Tiffany, wouldn't you love a place like Nathan's? Your little townhouse is nice, but maybe one day you'll have something like this." The table chuckled softly, but my Aunt Dorothy's eyes met mine from across the table, steady and knowing, silently urging me forward. I set down my fork, leaned back, and said calmly, "Actually, Dad, I bought that entire street last year, Nathan's house included." The room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. That moment changed everything, and I was just getting started. Growing up in the suburbs of Charlotte, our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. White colonial house, manicured lawn, golden retriever named Biscuit. But inside those walls, the story was different. My parents had a favorite child, and it wasn't me. Nathan was 3 years older, and from the time we could walk, he could do no wrong. I'd come home with straight A's on my report card, and Mom would barely glance up from her magazine. "That's nice, sweetie," she'd say, then turn to Nathan with her whole face lighting up. "You made varsity baseball? Oh honey, I'm so proud." His team finished last in their division that year, but to Mom and Dad, he was a champion. I remember spending 3 weeks building a miniature city for my 8th grade history project. I researched architecture, cut tiny buildings from cardboard, painted streets with careful precision. It won first place at the school fair, and I rushed home clutching the blue ribbon. Mom was helping Nathan with his English homework, going over vocabulary words he should have learned in elementary school. "We'll look at it later," she said, not even turning her head. Later never came. But when Nathan got a B- on that same English paper, Mom baked his favorite brownies to celebrate his improvement. I stood in the doorway, ribbon still in my hand, invisible. It wasn't just academics. I joined the swim team in middle school, practicing until my shoulders ached and my eyes burned from chlorine. I qualified for the state championships, got my picture in the Charlotte Observer. Mom didn't come to watch. She was at Nathan's basketball game, cheering from the bleachers while he sat on the bench the entire 4th quarter. That night, I asked her why she missed my race. She smiled absently. "Nathan needed support, honey. You understand." I didn't understand, but I learned to stop asking. Dad wasn't much better. He'd see my face fall when Mom praised Nathan for tying his shoes right or finishing his dinner, and he'd give me these sad, apologetic looks. Sometimes he'd take me for ice cream, just the 2 of us, and tell me I was special. "You're going to do amazing things, Tiff," he'd say quietly, like he didn't want Mom to hear. But he never stood up to her. When she went on and on about Nathan's potential, about how far he'd go, Dad would just nod along, keeping the peace. I wished he'd say something, anything, to make her see me. One summer, I taught myself to play guitar. I'd practice in my room for hours, fingers cramping on the strings, until I could play 3 full songs. I performed one for the family after dinner, my heart pounding with nervous hope. Mom clapped politely. "Very nice, dear." Then she immediately turned to Nathan. "Did you decide which college you're applying to?" Nathan shrugged. "I dunno. Maybe community college." "That's wonderful." Mom beamed. "You'll do great anywhere." I'd already been accepted to UNC Chapel Hill with a partial scholarship, but that news had earned me a quick good job 2 months earlier. Aunt Dorothy was different. She was Dad's younger sister, a real estate agent who drove a cherry red Mustang and wore leather jackets to family gatherings. She'd pull me aside during holidays and tell me stories about properties she'd sold, about building wealth brick by brick. "The world's bigger than this house, kid," she'd say. "And you're smart enough to own a piece of it." When I turned 13, Aunt Dorothy gave me a book about property investment. Mom frowned at the gift. "She's too young for that," Mom said. Aunt Dorothy just winked at me. "She's exactly the right age." That book became my Bible. I read it cover to cover 5 times, underlining passages, making notes in the margins. I started reading real estate listings like other kids read magazines, memorizing property values in different Charlotte neighborhoods. High school was my turning point. I stopped waiting for Mom's approval and started building towards something she couldn't ignore. I took extra math classes, studied economics, joined the business club. I worked weekends at a local property management office, filing papers, and learning how rental agreements worked. Every time Mom praised Nathan for getting a part in the school play or making the lacrosse team, I'd think about the properties I'd own someday. I wasn't competing with him anymore. I was building something they couldn't diminish. Senior year, I organized a charity auction that raised $11,000 for foster kids. The mayor came to present the award. I looked out at the crowd, searching for Mom's face. She wasn't there. Nathan had a lacrosse tournament, and she never missed those. I gripped that award on stage, smiled for the cameras, and made myself a promise. I'd build an empire so undeniable that one day, they'd have no choice but to see me. After high school, I earned a full scholarship to UNC Chapel Hill, majoring in business administration with a focus on real estate development. My professors noticed something my parents never had. I had a gift for seeing potential where others saw problems. By junior year, I was interning at Piedmont Property Group, one of Charlotte's top commercial firms. I'd arrive before sunrise, leave after dark, absorbing everything. How to spot undervalued properties. How to negotiate with sellers who thought they had the upper hand. How to turn a neglected duplex into a gold mine. The day I graduated, Mom and Dad sent me a card with a $100 check. "Congratulations, Tiffany. We are proud." Nathan's graduation 3 years earlier had been a full party, catered food, open bar, at least 60 guests. Mine was a Hallmark card delivered 2 days late. I didn't complain. I cashed that check and put it toward my first investment. At 23, I bought my first property, a small duplex in a transitioning neighborhood near downtown Charlotte. It needed work: new roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint. I spent weekends doing repairs myself, YouTube videos playing on my phone as I learned to fix drywall and install light fixtures. 6 months later, both units were rented. The monthly income covered my mortgage with money left over. That's when I understood. This was it. This was my path to freedom. Over the next 5 years, I was relentless. I lived in that same modest townhouse, drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic, bought clothes from Target. Every spare dollar went into properties. A condo here, a townhouse there, a small commercial building near the university. By 28, I owned 9 properties across Charlotte. By 31, that number had jumped to 17. Then came the big one. I learned that an entire residential street in Myers Park, one of Charlotte's most exclusive neighborhoods, was going up for sale. The developer who owned it had overextended himself, and the bank was motivated to sell the whole package at once. 12 houses. Beautiful, historic homes with mature oak trees and brick driveways. The kind of street where doctors and lawyers and old money families lived. The asking price was steep, $8.4 million. I'd been saving, planning, building my credit and my portfolio for exactly this kind of opportunity. I brought together 3 silent investors, secured bank financing, and submitted an offer. 6 weeks of negotiations later, the street was mine. 12 rental properties in one transaction. I hired a management company to handle the day-to-day operations, while I negotiated lease agreements with the existing residents, most of whom were relieved to stay in their homes. One of those houses belonged to my brother. Nathan and Veronica had bought their 5-bedroom showcase home 2 years earlier with substantial help from Mom and Dad, down payment, closing costs, new furniture. They'd stretched themselves thin to afford that neighborhood, that lifestyle, that image. When I closed on the street, I learned Nathan was technically my tenant. His mortgage holder had sold the note to the previous developer, and now I owned it. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I set up an LLC with a generic name, had the management company handle all correspondence. Nathan kept making his mortgage payments, never knowing they were coming to me. Mom would call occasionally, asking about my little real estate job. I'd tell her it was fine, keeping things vague. Then she'd launch into updates about Nathan's latest promotion at the marketing firm, or the new furniture Veronica bought, or their vacation plans. You should see their house, Tiffany, Mom would gush. It's absolutely stunning. Maybe you can visit sometime. I'd visited that street 100 times. I'd walked every inch of it, knew every property value, every tax record, every rental agreement. But I just said, "That sounds nice, Mom," and changed the subject. My friend Chloe, my roommate from college who became a financial journalist, was one of the few people who knew the truth. We met for coffee one afternoon, and she pulled up property records on her laptop. "Tiffany," she said, eyes wide, "you own Myers Park Properties LLC? That's a 12-property portfolio." I shrugged, sipping my cappuccino. "Why don't you tell people?" she asked. "This is incredible. You're incredible." "Because it's not about them knowing," I said. "It's about me knowing." Chloe shook her head, half frustrated, half impressed. "One day you're going to blow their minds." I smiled. Maybe. Meanwhile, Nathan and Veronica leaned hard into their lifestyle. Instagram posts of their wine cellar, their backyard fire pit, their weekend trips to Charleston and Hilton Head. Mom would text me screenshots, proud as could be. What she didn't know, Chloe's contacts in banking told me Nathan had taken out a home equity line of credit to fund their lifestyle. They were spending money they didn't have, trying to keep up appearances. I said nothing. I just kept collecting rent, kept building my empire, kept preparing for the day when I'd finally show them who I'd become. That day came last Tuesday. I pulled up to my parents' house in my Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving for years. Nathan's black Mercedes SUV was already in the driveway, gleaming under the porch lights. Inside, the smell of Mom's pot roast filled the air, her signature dish for family dinners. I took my usual seat at the table, the same chair I'd sat in since childhood, positioned slightly away from the center where Nathan always held court. Dad opened a bottle of wine, pouring generous glasses. "So Nathan," he started, already grinning, "tell us about the new home theater system." Nathan leaned back, hands behind his head. "It's a Bose setup, top of the line. 7 speakers, a projector that cost more than most people's cars. The screen drops down from the ceiling, total cinema experience." Veronica jumped in, bracelets jangling. "The installer said it's one of the best residential systems in Charlotte. We are hosting a Super Bowl party next month. It'll be incredible." Mom clasped her hands together. "You two have built such a beautiful life. That house is just a dream." I cut into my pot roast, saying nothing. Dad refilled his wine glass, then looked at me with that familiar expression, part pity, part patronizing concern. "Tiffany, you should really see Nathan's place. The architecture alone is worth the visit. Those crown moldings, the Corford ceilings. The walk-in closets are bigger than most bedrooms," Veronica added, her tone just barely concealing smugness. Nathan smirked. "You'd love it, sis. It's what you should aspire to." I set down my fork, the metal clinking against the plate louder than I intended. Aunt Dorothy, sitting diagonal from me, caught my eye. She didn't say anything, but I saw the slightest nod. A silent message, "This is your moment." Dad continued, oblivious. "Maybe one day you'll have a place like that, Tiffany. Your townhouse is nice, but—" He gestured vaguely. "You know, there's levels to this." The table chuckled. Even Mom smiled, shaking her head like I was a child who needed gentle guidance. Something inside me finally broke free. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. "Actually, Dad, I bought that entire street last year. Nathan's house included." The laughter died instantly. Dad's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Mom's smile froze, her eyes widening with confusion. Nathan's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief. Veronica's mouth fell open, mid-reach for her water glass. "What?" Dad said. Myers Park Properties LLC, I said evenly. That's my company. I own all 12 houses on Nathan's Street. I bought them 18 months ago for $8.4 million. Current value is closer to $11 million. Nathan's face drained of color. You're lying. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and found the property deed summary. I slid it across the table. Deed records are public. You can look it up yourself. 1847 Elmwood Drive through 1971 Elmwood Drive. All mine. Dad grabbed my phone, his hand shaking slightly as he scrolled. Mom leaned over his shoulder, reading. Her lips moved silently, processing the information. This can't be real, Nathan stammered. You live in a townhouse. You drive a Honda. Because I prefer to invest my money instead of spending it on appearances, I said. My properties generate $47,000 a month in rental income. That townhouse? I rent it. The Honda? Paid off. No debt, no mortgage on my personal residence, just steady cash flow. Veronica's face had gone pale. But you pay me rent every month, I said, looking at Nathan. Well, technically you pay Myers Park Properties LLC, but same thing. I'm your landlord, Nathan. Have been for over a year. The silence was deafening. Aunt Dorothy couldn't hide her smile anymore. She raised her wine glass slightly, a private toast. Mom found her voice, sharp and defensive. Why would you hide this? This is deceitful. Something inside me snapped completely. Deceitful. I said, my voice rising. Like when I won the state swimming championship and you missed it for Nathan's basketball game where he sat on the bench. Like when I got accepted to UNC with a scholarship and you threw Nathan a graduation party for barely finishing community college. Tiffany, Dad started. No, I cut him off. You want to talk about my life? Let's talk about it. When I was 12, I built that model city that won first place. You promised to look at it later. You never did. But when Nathan got a B-, you baked brownies. When I organized that charity auction senior year, the one that raised $11,000, you weren't there. Nathan's lacrosse tournament was more important. Mom's face flushed. That's not fair. What's not fair, I said, standing now, is spending my entire childhood begging for a fraction of the attention you gave Nathan. What's not fair is watching you fund his life, his house, his wedding, his everything, while I got $100 check for college graduation. I pulled out a folder from my bag, I'd brought it just in case, and dropped it on the table. Inside were property deeds, financial statements, portfolio summaries. I built this empire alone, I said. No handouts. No help. I worked 2 jobs through college. I lived on ramen and ambition. Every property you see in that folder, I earned through 12-hour days and cold calling and learning to fix plumbing at 2 a.m. because I couldn't afford contractors. Nathan grabbed the folder, flipping through pages, his hands trembling. How did you? I was smarter than you gave me credit for, I said simply. That's how. Dad set down my phone, his face ashen. For the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that looked like respect. And maybe shame. Tiffany, he said quietly. I didn't know. Because you never asked, I said. Neither of you did. You assumed I was struggling, assumed I was small, assumed I'd always be the daughter who didn't matter as much. Mom stood up, her voice shaking. How dare you speak to us like this? After everything we've done. What have you done? I interrupted, my voice ice cold. Name one thing you did for me that you didn't do 10 times over for Nathan. One thing. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. Aunt Dorothy spoke for the first time. She can't, Tiffany. Because there isn't one. The room went silent again. I picked up my bag, looked at each of them. I didn't come here to gloat. I came because you invited me to another dinner where you'd make me feel small. But I'm done feeling small. I'm done being invisible. I walked toward the door. Tiffany, wait, Dad called. I stopped, didn't turn around. You raised me to be invisible, Dad. Congratulations. You succeeded. Now you can live with it. I walked out, closing the door behind me. The morning after the dinner, I woke up to 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. I ignored all of them, made myself coffee, and sat on my small balcony watching Charlotte wake up. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Aunt Dorothy. Proud of you, kid. That took guts. Call me when you're ready. I smiled, texted back a simple thank you, and finally checked the other messages. Mom, we need to talk as a family. This is unacceptable. Dad, Tiffany, please. Let's discuss this like adults. Nathan, you embarrassed me in front of everyone. What's your problem? Veronica, this is why we never include you. You're jealous and petty. I deleted the thread and blocked Nathan and Veronica's numbers. I'd dealt with enough. Chloe called during lunch. I heard through the grapevine that dinner was eventful. I laughed, actually laughed. That's one word for it. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about the stunned silence, the folder of deeds, Mom's defensiveness, Nathan's pale face. When I finished, Chloe whistled low. You're my hero, she said. Seriously. Do you know how many people wish they could have that moment? It felt necessary, I said. I'm tired, Chloe. Tired of pretending I'm less than I am just to make them comfortable. So what happens now? I thought about that. Now I keep building. They either accept reality or they don't. Either way, I'm done shrinking myself. The next few days were quiet. I threw myself into work, reviewing lease agreements and meeting with my property manager about some renovations on the commercial building near campus. Then Dad showed up at my townhouse unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat on my couch, looking around at my simple furniture, my minimalist decor. I never understood how you lived, he said quietly. This place is nice, but I thought you were struggling. I was never struggling, I said, sitting across from him. I was strategic. He nodded slowly. Your mother and we've been talking. Or trying to. It's not going well. I'm not surprised. She doesn't want to admit it, he continued, but I've been thinking about what you said. About the swimming championship, the auction, all of it. You were right, Tiffany. We failed you. Hearing him say it should have felt validating. Instead, I just felt tired. I'm not looking for an apology, I said. It's too late for that to fix anything. I know, he said, his voice heavy. But I need you to know I see it now. I see you. What you've built. Who you are. I'm proud of you. I should have said it years ago. You should have, I agreed. But you didn't. We sat in uncomfortable silence. Your mother wants you to apologize to Nathan, he finally said. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Absolutely not. I told her that wouldn't happen, Dad said quickly. I told her she's being unreasonable. That's why we're not in a good place right now. That's not my problem to fix, I said. He nodded again, stood up. I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you, even if I have no right to be. After he left, I sat on my couch for a long time, processing. His words mattered, but they didn't change the past. They didn't erase the years of being overlooked. A week later, Aunt Dorothy called with news. Nathan and Veronica are in trouble, she said. Financial trouble. I figured, I said. No, I mean serious trouble. Apparently, they took out a home equity loan last year to fund renovations and vacations. Now they can't make payments. The bank's threatening foreclosure. I felt a strange emptiness. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just nothing. That's unfortunate, I said. Your mother's freaking out, Aunt Dorothy continued. She wants to give them money from her retirement fund. Your dad's refusing. Good for him. She's furious. Apparently, they're talking about separating. That got my attention. Separating. Your dad finally grew a spine, Aunt Dorothy said, and I could hear the approval in her voice. He told her he's done enabling her favoritism, done watching it destroy the family. She didn't take it well. I should have felt something: concern, worry, even vindictive satisfaction. Instead, I just felt hollow. That's their choice to make, I said. You're handling this well, Aunt Dorothy observed. I'm handling it the only way I know how, I said. By focusing on what I can control. And that's what I did. I threw myself into work, into my properties, into building something that had nothing to do with my family's dysfunction. 3 months after that explosive dinner, I made a decision that changed everything again. I was reviewing quarterly reports when the idea hit me. I'd built this empire for myself, but what if I used it for something bigger? I called Chloe. I want to start a foundation. Something for kids who grew up like me, overlooked, underestimated, but brilliant. Scholarships? She asked. More than that, I said. Mentorship. Real estate education. Business training. I want to teach kids from underfunded schools how to build wealth, how to see opportunities. Chloe was quiet for a moment. That's beautiful, Tiff. It's necessary, I corrected. Over the next 2 months, I worked with attorneys and accountants to establish the Crawford Foundation for Youth Opportunity. I committed $200,000 in seed money and pledged 5% of my annual rental income to fund it. The first event was held at a community center in West Charlotte. 20 high school juniors and seniors attended, most from low-income neighborhoods where college felt like an impossible dream. I stood before them, nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. I grew up invisible, I told them. My family didn't see my potential. Teachers didn't expect much. But I learned something crucial. Other people's blindness doesn't define your worth. I spent 3 hours teaching them about property investment, about credit scores, about building wealth through smart decisions rather than inheritance. Their eyes lit up with possibilities they'd never considered. At the end, a girl named Shanice approached me. She was 16, wore a North Carolina A&T hoodie, and had the most intense, intelligent eyes. Miss Crawford, she said, is this real? Can people like us really do this? People like us already are, I said. You just haven't been shown how yet. Her smile could have powered the city. The foundation grew quickly. Chloe wrote an article about it for the Charlotte Business Journal, and suddenly I was getting calls from donors, from schools, from other entrepreneurs who wanted to help. I hired 2 part-time staff members, expanded to monthly workshops, and started a scholarship program for students pursuing business degrees. Mom tried calling again, leaving voicemails that swung between apologetic and accusatory. I didn't return them. Nathan's number stayed blocked. Dad sent the occasional text, saw your foundation in the paper. You're doing good things. Which I appreciated but didn't encourage. The only family member I stayed in contact with was Aunt Dorothy, who became my partner in the foundation. She taught workshops on real estate sales, brought in colleagues to talk about property management, and treated every student like they were destined for greatness. You're changing lives, she told me after one particularly successful workshop. I'm showing them they can change their own lives, I corrected. There's a difference. 6 months into the foundation's existence, I learned through Aunt Dorothy that Nathan and Veronica had indeed lost their house. They'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Charlotte, both working extra jobs to pay down debt. Mom and Dad had officially separated. He'd moved into a condo downtown, started going to therapy, and, according to Aunt Dorothy, was finally dealing with his own enabling behavior. Mom remained in the family home, isolated and angry, refusing to acknowledge her role in any of it. I felt sympathy, but it was distant. These were the consequences of their choices, just as my success was the consequence of mine. Then one day, Shanice, the girl from that first workshop, called me. Miss Crawford, she said, breathless with excitement, I got accepted to UNC Charlotte with a full scholarship. I'm going to study business, just like you. I felt tears prick my eyes. Shanice, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. I wouldn't have applied without your foundation, she said. You showed me I could do this. Thank you. That phone call mattered more than any amount of money in my account, more than any property deed, more than my parents' approval ever could have. This was what success actually looked like, creating opportunity for others, showing them their own potential, helping them build something that couldn't be taken away. A year after that dinner, I sat in my townhouse, the same modest place I'd always rented, and took stock of my life. The Crawford Foundation had awarded $175,000 in scholarships and served over 200 students. 12 of them were now enrolled in college programs. 3 had started their own small businesses. My property portfolio had grown to 21 units, generating nearly $60,000 monthly. I'd sold 2 properties at significant profit and reinvested in a mixed-use development near uptown Charlotte. I'd been interviewed by local news, invited to speak at conferences, and recognized by the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce for community impact. And I'd done it all without my family's support or approval. Aunt Dorothy stopped by one evening with Thai food and wine. We sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the city orange and gold. "Have you heard from them?" she asked, meaning Mom and Dad. "Dad texts occasionally," I said. "Mom doesn't." "Your mother's struggling," Aunt Dorothy said carefully. The separation hit her hard. "She's lost weight, barely leaves the house." I felt that distant sympathy again. "I'm sorry she's hurting. But I can't fix what she broke." "I'm not asking you to," Aunt Dorothy said. "I'm just telling you." We ate in comfortable silence. "Do you regret it?" she finally asked. "Cutting them off?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. "No," I said. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they never saw me until I forced them to. But cutting ties? That saved me. It let me become who I was meant to be without constantly shrinking myself to fit their expectations." "You've built something remarkable," Aunt Dorothy said softly. "Not just the properties or the money. The foundation, the lives you're changing, that's your real legacy." "I hope so," I said. 2 weeks later, Dad showed up again. This time, he looked different, lighter somehow, like he'd put down weight he'd carried for years. "I'm in therapy," he said without preamble. "Twice a week. Dealing with my codependency issues, learning why I enabled your mother for so long." "Good," I said. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late for us." "It's not too late," I said slowly, surprising myself. "But it's different now. I'm not the daughter who needs your approval anymore." "I can see that," he said, a sad smile crossing his face. "You're extraordinary, Tiffany. You always were. I'm sorry I couldn't see it." We talked for an hour. He told me about therapy, about recognizing patterns from his own childhood, about finally standing up to Mom's favoritism. I told him about the foundation, about the students, about finding purpose beyond proving myself. When he left, he hugged me at the door. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but I am." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Mom never reached out. Through Aunt Dorothy, I learned she'd told family members I'd betrayed her, that I'd humiliated Nathan, that I was selfish and vindictive. It hurt less than I expected. You can't be hurt by someone who never really saw you in the first place. Nathan eventually unblocked my number and sent a short text. "I get it now. I'm sorry." I didn't respond immediately. Let him sit with that apology. Let him understand what it means to be invisible. 3 days later, I replied, "I hope you're doing okay." Nothing more, nothing less. On the 1-year anniversary of that explosive dinner, Chloe took me out to celebrate. We went to an upscale restaurant in uptown Charlotte, toasted with expensive wine, laughed about how far we'd come. "You did it," she said, raising her glass. "You built an empire and changed lives in the process. You're everything you said you'd be." "I'm still building," I corrected, clinking my glass against hers. "This is just the beginning." And it was. I had plans to expand the foundation, to buy more properties, to create more opportunities for kids who needed someone to believe in them. But more than that, I'd learned the most important lesson: your worth isn't determined by who sees it. It's determined by what you build when no one's watching. I'd spent my childhood being invisible, my 20s building in silence, and my 30s claiming my space unapologetically. I was no longer the overlooked daughter. I was Tiffany Crawford, property owner, foundation founder, mentor, and architect of my own extraordinary life. And this time, I'd done it on my own terms.